Hello, guess what time it is? Not time for me to sing. Hey, it's Glenn, and this is your podcast of the Lost Beatles Surround Recordings. And this is going to be the most important episode we've ever had. In this episode, I'm going to first, and not foremost, I'm going to review my two latest discoveries. That's a good word. Of surround sound Beatle recordings, and then later on, I'll tell you where and how I got them. Now, if you decide you want to go in and try and follow my footsteps, that's up to you. But I'm just making sure that YouTube knows, because they're picky about it. I'm not sending you somewhere to go buy something. I'm just telling you where I got it. I would just remind you or encourage you that these products disappear, and when they are gone, they're gone forever. And if you take your age now, how old are you? And how many years you have left on this planet? And did you know it's gone down? I don't know if we were the only country or if it was the first time in our history, but it's the first time in our history that your life expectancy actually got shorter under the Trump administration due to bad food and him lifting the lid on all of the safety measures that we had to protect our food. And we now, not only is our life expectancy shorter, but we're shorter. The men now are about an inch shorter than they were in 2010, the average U.S. man. Very sad. Very sad. Can you believe it that this is the first time in history that, well, it's 8 years or 9 years, but we're actually shorter than Dutch men. Yeah, in Europe. If you take the average Dutch man and put him against the average American man, they've got 2 inches on us. They're 2 inches taller than we are. Why? Because they have better food and better health care. So the point is, here we are, and I've gotten in these fantastic 2, I have to call them CDs because they actually are in CD DTS format. So they are a CD that your receiver decodes. You can also, of course, have your CD, DVD, Blu-ray player do the decoding. My understanding is you get a much better sounding product if you let your receiver do the decoding. But anyway, what that means is that the 5.1 sound that you get, although it sounds great, is not the highest quality sound that is available on the market today because it's lossy. There's stuff done to it, to the music, subtracted from it in order to make it fit on a CD. Well, that's a shame, but I've never seen any of these files in any other format except the DTS lossy format. If somebody somewhere came out with the lossless format, holy cow, I would rebuy all of these over again. I really would. I would buy every one of them that I have, and I have every Beatles album, I think. I do, yeah. I'm mentally going through it. I think I have every Beatles album in surround sound. Wait a minute, they're not offered. Yes, they are. They were made in surround sound. They just weren't put out because the 4 of them at that time got together. No, I think it was Paul, Ringo, and George's estate and John's estate. and they got together and listened to the surround sound mixes, and unfortunately that means you would be starting with Please Please Me and with the Beatles, and those really don't sound good at all. And my understanding is that's what burned them out. Whoever was doing that demonstration should have started with the either the White Album, which is not the mix, not at all the mix that you buy when you go to the store. It was a different, very aggressive mix with all 4 channels having roughly equal say in the music. I would have shown him that, and I think that would have changed everything. And it's certainly, if you compare it to what eventually came out, oh no, what a turd. So, remember that White Album that is on the shelves today, or on the virtual shelves, that album is under the contractual condition, the secret contract that is ruining the Beatles' music, that says that every edition that comes out now has to sound like the album did when people bought it in the 60s or 1970. So whatever it sounded like when you got your disc, your black LP, and took it home, put it on the record player, that's what the surround sound has to sound like. So there's not much you can do except maybe augment the sound. Well, that's the bad news, and I think it's terrible news. But there is good news, and the good news is right here in my hand. The first one is Revolver. Oh, yeah, Giles Martin is, he's the one who says, oh, it can't be done. Oh, Revolver, there's just no way. He's wrong, and Revolver is just great, just a wonderful CD, DTS CD 5.1 with very good sound. And I don't think there's anything missing because Revolver had adequate sound for the time, for 66. But you're not missing anything when you put it onto a DTS disc because there wasn't any great sound. It wasn't recorded to the standards of other music from the 90s and 2000 that have such great sound that only an SACD or a CD that can capture lossless sound can adequately project. So Revolver is out, and like I said, I will tell you where I got it. And it's just the standard Revolver. There are no bonus cuts, but it is 5.1. Now, yes, I know they just came out with the deluxe Revolver, and Giles Martin gave some sort of interviews about, well, I'd have loved to, but the quality of the tapes just isn't up. Well, I don't know what he's talking about because I've sat here and listened to this new Revolver, and I have not yet done the comparison to see how it compares to what I believe is the same recording that I've had just as a file, as a download, but not as a disc. Now, why would I buy it on a disc if I already have it as a download? For some reason, I think they have a better sound when I get them on a disc and put it into the old Oppo, okay? I don't think there's any reason I can come up with. There's no explanation for that. But to me, they just sound better when I take them out of the jacket and I put them in the CD player, and I hit play, and the drawer shuts, and boom. It really sounds good. And, of course, I get a nice jacket, and it's got artwork and stuff like that. It does have a different cover than it did. It has a charcoal drawing of the four Beatles, and it's very, very, very well done. And the back is the same as the Beatles album Revolver from England, but with a nice little scrawl across the bottom, might be the side, and it says DTS 5.1 surround sound. And it ain't lying. That's what you're getting. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the songs actually might be just 3 channels, maybe a voice in the front and a rear right, rear left. Who's going to know? What's the difference? That still counts as surround sound in my book. And it sounds great. Oh my gosh, oh golly. Certain songs you can already going to tell are going to sound great. I mean, first of all, you get Eleanor Rigby, and it's got the violins all spread out. Actually, they're not that spread out, but half of them are in the rear channel and half in the front. So now all of a sudden, what they really, for some reason, I've never figured this out. George Martin, another blunder by him. They put those strings in mono on the original Revolver album. Mono string quartet. Who needs that? Well, here it was recorded in stereo, and here they put one of the tracks. I think it's the one with the higher end, with the that'd be the violin and the viola, are in the rear channel, and the ones with the nice deep, cello and bass are in the front, so that the big speakers are putting out the strings that go lower. So that's a very great decision by whoever it was that mixed this. I believe it was Abbey Road. And I don't know, but there's some things here that are just breathtaking, like the one to lead a better life, here, there, and everywhere. It's got Paul up in front, okay? That's nice, real nice. Just, a flat wall with Paul up in front. And boy, oh boy, you get the 3 boys behind you. I think it's actually a doubling. I think it's 6. I read that somewhere. But you get them, the harmonies, those beautiful harmonies, and they're out of the rear channel. And does that sound striking? Oh my God, it sounds great. So I just want to encourage you as much as I can. If you have a chance to follow my lead, you're going to get yourself an album that you're probably going to listen to for the rest of your life, right? Any reason why that wouldn't happen? Think about it. If you listen to it, let's just say twice a week. Even right now when it's new and hot in your hand and you're dying to listen to it, let's say, I'm not, impressed by all this stuff. I'll just listen to it maybe once a week or twice a week. Okay, great. So twice a week. So that's going to be 100 times a year. And you've got, let's say, 30 years left on this planet. So now you're talking about 100 times a year times 30 years would be 3,000 times you're going to listen to that album. So let's say you're only willing to pay $1 per listen. Boy, are you cheap. But that's all you'd be willing to pay to hear it in beautiful surround sound at your beck and call. So whenever you want, you hit it, you get to hear the entire album in surround, and the most you'd pay to have that privilege would be, let's say, $1. Okay, so that means that disc has a value to you of $3,000. Don't let it get away. The current cost is less than $30. It's probably double what an ordinary album costs, but you have to remember that the people that assemble this and ship it and put it together are taking a little bit of a risk that Walmart is not taking when they put an album out in the racks for you to buy. So the fact that these guys get maybe another $10 or $15 more than albums that you buy in Walmart, the latest, by Willow or whatever, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They're getting more money because they are taking a real risk. That's one album. Now, that album is great. I give it an A. Pretty good, huh? The next one is better. I give it an A+. What? And it's one you don't have. Well, okay, you might have it, but it's one that nobody's heard in surround, and it has an advantage over all the other surround albums that, well, let's just get into it. It is the Beatles' Yellow Submarine Songtrack. Now, that weird name is what the Beatles gave to the album they made that... Can they say they made it? I mean, it came out in 1999. I don't know if you'd say the Beatles made it. No, I think it was created by Abbey Road, really. Well, okay, that's the album that has the songs from Yellow Submarine, but has no orchestral music. Like if you just said, well, I want to hear the soundtrack from Yellow Submarine. Well, you can get that. You can buy that. But that comes with 6 songs and 6 pieces of classical music. And believe it or not, that is also available from the same source that this one. But the Songtrack, the sound quality is shockingly good. And it has a great advantage over all the other discs in that it came in under the wire. It was made in, I think it was either 89 or 90, something like that, where it first was cut, but then the mixing was done in, I believe it was 99, and that was before the edict. So that was before there was a rule that said that you must make this recording sound exactly as it did to the people who bought the album Yellow Submarine when it came out and played it on an LP, on a record player. So he was freed of those horrible strings, and he was, for the first time, and I know we mentioned this last time, but he was given the permission to go in to Abbey Road's vaults, get all of the many multi-tracks, so each recording of, here's the bell that they ring during Yellow Submarine. Well, he's got that all laid out, and so that's why on Yellow Submarine, which of course is on this album, he's got the part that everybody hates when it's cut out. So he's got the part where when Ringo says... Ringo says something and the voice echoes it, "A life of ease!" Now, that isn't on most renditions. I've heard it might be on the stereo version of the latest Revolver release. But here, Peter Cobell, he just put it right in there as loud as anything else. It doesn't come up in volume while the guy's talking. It just starts off with us, live a life of ease. A life of ease! Every one of us. And it's loud, and it comes out of the rear speakers like somebody's yelling to get into your house, and it sounds just terrific. One of the great things, I think the purpose is to shock you a little bit, is the opening of the album. The first notes of the album come out of the rear speakers, both speakers. So by doing that gives them better quality sound, since it sounds better if it comes out of both speakers at the same time. So when the album starts up and all of a sudden you've got that strange piano out of Hey Bulldog, doot, 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 doot. It comes out of the rear speakers, and it is loud and clear and shockingly placed so that it's behind you and the rest of the Beatles are all in front of you and surrounding you. And this album gives no preference to the front speakers. The rear speakers have just as much musical information as the fronts. And so when you sit there listening in surround sound, you're in the middle of the music and it sounds superb. And as I've said a million times now, it is completely remixed. So this was a stereo CD and very highly sought after. It was out of print and it was really just hard to find because the stereo version sounded so much better than the other stereo versions of the same songs. This guy was really a wizard. He knew how to mix music, and he was given access that nobody else, like Giles Martin, ever was. He was allowed to remix instead of from the finished stereo work, where his job was basically to just polish, to put lipstick on the pig. He got to go in and reconstruct it from the very multi-track, the very basic multi-tracks. So he got to do whatever he wanted with the sound, and he knew what he was doing. So you've got just the most wonderful CD, I guess we'd call it, but it is, like I said, it is in DTS 5.1 and sounds absolutely terrific. There's all of the songs that you would hope would be on there, like Baby, You're a Rich Man. Oh, and does that sound good? I mean, that has never sounded very good because it was, to my listening, it was in monaural or the foolishly faked monaural that people had for a while. But this one here that is on here, it is now in full 5.1 surround sound. I mean, there is no mistaking it for anything other than just a surround sound bonanza. No, it doesn't sound like Bonanza, actually. So I've listened to this album probably 30 times, and it only gets better with each listen. But again, the lineup. Oh, it does start with Yellow Submarine. That's my mistake. And it's a completely different mix of Yellow Submarine from anything I've ever heard elsewhere, because it starts off with the music at the front, and all the music sounds at the front. And for a minute, you think, oh, no, did I buy a stereo CD and pay a lot of money for it? And then all of a sudden, the waves come in, the sounds of the ocean, and they are mixed up so loud that it almost drowns out Ringo and the band at the front. And so as he sings the rest of the song, you've got just loud and clear, and it really makes an interesting balance to the song. It's like Ringo's trying to be heard through the noise of the waves. And that might, in some ways, there might be a diminution of the quality of the sound, but I think I like it because it's different than I've been stuck hearing for 50 years. I get a chance to hear something different. But it is a completely different mix. And next is Hey Bulldog, and that is, like I said, that's just a shocker with the piano starting out of the rear channels, very loud, very separate from anything else. And, I did forget one thing on Yellow Submarine, that the ending, which you might call the sing-along, We All Live, that only comes out of the rear speakers except for Ringo. So there is one Ringo in the front center, and he's singing his part. And then you can hear a second Ringo singing his part, he does a good job. It's harmony, and he sings it out of the rear speakers along with what I believe is the three, John, George, and Paul doubled. And so they're all singing behind you. You've got 7 or 8 people singing behind you and one in front of you. And boy, oh boy, you don't get better Beatles than that. After you're done with Hey Bulldog, you get Eleanor Rigby, and we've talked about that already, but the strings are now spread out. So they were in stereo, if you were lucky, and now better in stereo. They're in front and rear of the stereo picture. The surround sound picture, not stereo picture. How about after that is the horrendous musical turd, Love You Too, by the other guy, by the Spare. All together now. So kind of an unneeded, but Paul makes a song for little children that should have been on an album for children. But it does sound much better than you've ever heard it, with all of the background singing and kids and whatever coming out of the rear speakers, and Paul doing the attention-grabbing center sound right in front of you. So that sound, the mix on is terrific, because the background singers go from the left rear speaker all the way across to the right rear speaker, and you can hear all sorts of people in there. Who's that person singing? But it does sound absolutely fantastic. Best I've ever heard it sound anywhere. After you're done listening with All Together Now, you get Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and you know you're in unexplored territory when the harpsichord that opens the song comes out of the rear speakers. Now, they never did that with Sgt. Pepper, that came out with George Martin's son doing the mixing. This one, no Giles Martin touching the controls, and you've got Sgt. Pepper recordings, I think there's 3 of them in there. Lucy in the Sky, Sgt. Pepper, with a little help. And you've got them in full-fledged surround sound. I don't even have a word for it, but it's just that good. You're now hearing how Sgt. Pepper could have been done if this gentleman, Peter, had been allowed to remix the album of Sgt. Pepper. You've got 4 or 5 speakers ferociously fighting for a musical signal, and all of them put out something worth listening to. All of them, you could turn off the other speakers and just listen to that one speaker, and you would hear some interesting stuff. So after you've got Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, you've got the dreadful Think for Yourself, and with Paul's fuzz bass. Boy, was that a mistake. Ugh. Paul's ill-advised fuzz bass. Luckily, that was the last time we ever heard that instrument, because it did just basically sound like farting. Nobody wants to say it, but that's what it sounded like. They should have instantly dropped the idea. Okay, so next is an interesting combination of songs. First is Sgt. Pepper in complete total surround, which you've never heard. Even if you have the surround sound Sgt. Pepper, that turkey is not in the same leagues as this one, which is actually 5 full channels of surround music, all blaring at you. No 2 big stereos in the front, and you get surround sound decay or delay in the rears. No, this thing has got all the music now spread out through all 5 channels, and it sounds great. But the one thing that does, this is what stops me from giving it an A+. I would give it an A, almost an A+, but it has this one mistake, and that is that between Sgt. Pepper and With a Little Help from My Friends, they stopped the music. Well, yeah, it plays Sgt. Pepper, and it goes past the point where Ringo and With a Little Help should have come in, and instead it finishes. You hear Sgt. Pepper fade away, and it's done. And then another few seconds later, it starts up with, you hear Ringo's come in With a Little Help from My Friends. That's odd. And then I don't think it's incurable. I think if you spend an hour with Audacity, you can probably join them. Find out when you listen to a copy of the album what time on the clock it is that Ringo's knowledgeable count in when he comes in and he does his "What would you do if I sang?" So you might be able to join them with Audacity. I don't know if it's in DTS, so I know Audacity has a real. It doesn't handle DTS well, so maybe not. All right, but then you do get a wonderful, wonderful Ringo with a little help from my friends. It doesn't have the fantastic job that I did when I made my own mix of that song, but I made one where we had "Do You Need Anybody?" So we had that out of the left rear channel, and then when all the Beatles come in, which is 2 3-packs, I had them coming out of the left and right rear channel. So that was just flooded with Beatles in the back, doing the background singing with Ringo in the front. This doesn't have that. This one has the background singing, unfortunately, in the front. I don't understand why that would be. So we've got, with a little help from my friends, "Baby You're a Rich Man" in fantastic stereo. Only a northern song, actually a decent song. I like it, even though it's written by the Spare. "All You Need Is Love," I think that's out on one, but this is just a better mix in every way. "When I'm 64," again, it crushes the other versions. So you ought to just put that on here, that you gave proper attention for the first time to "When I'm 64," and how about with a little help from my friends, that you can tell your friends, I finally heard this song in proper surround sound. I finally heard it so that I've heard all of the speakers kicking butt and displaying, 5 speakers would present, each doing 20% of the music. And I finally have the feeling of being inside the surround sound band. And therefore, I don't want to hear any more in the stereo versions of the song. Now, that really does happen. That is not a joke. That is not something that I'm just saying to, to encourage you to buy it, which I'm not. It really, once you hear these, you're not going to go back to stereo. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know if that's a problem or not, but you're not going to go back. It's just, these are so far superb. Now, many people said that about the original stereo version of Yellow Submarine Songtrack, that this guy Peter's mix was just so much better that was it. They were not going to go back to any other version of these songs because Peter made a stereo version on a CD and it sounded great, which it did, so that's all that was needed. Well, no, somebody got in there and took his great version and made it into great surround sound. And after we get, where were we? "All You Need Is Love." There's 3 more. You get "When I'm 64," like we talked about. "Nowhere Man," with its very similar to the Moody Blues. It's got 1 voice out of each speaker. Wow, does that sound good? And the way they did that is "Nowhere Man" is 2 3s. So you got John, George, and Paul singing once, and then we got John, George, and Paul singing twice. So if you take the first one and put it out of the rear speakers, you would have John, George, and Paul out of the left rear. And then if you take the second threesome and put it out of the front, you would have a different, but John, George, and then Paul out of the right front, left and right front. So "Nowhere Man" sounds astounding. You can't compare it to anything. And the last song, which does have the extra verse in it, is "It's All Too Much," which is not a terrible song. For George, it's great. But for the average person, it's okay, all right. And it is very difficult for us to try and figure out how George could vary so much and make, a song like this, which is adequate, good Beatles song, and then a turkey like Love You Too. I think it was the Indian period. When he was making Indian music, he should have been temporarily removed from the band, is my opinion. Because if he wasn't willing to do Indian music somewhere else, they should have politely shown him the door and gotten a real lead guitarist, somebody who actually could make a solo, come in. If they said, okay, we need a solo here, somebody who could do it. Because as George Martin said, he couldn't make a solo to save his life. He just didn't have that talent, which is a necessary talent for a band, which is why they should have thrown him out. We'll not get into that. So, all right, where did I get it? Well, it was a hunt. It was a rabbit hole on the interweb net. I started with a site called Jagamart, which has many, many CDs of all sorts, and it even has a folder when you're shopping online called Beatles, and it's alternate versions and quads. Well, most of the ones I bought came through that section. And the alternate ones, here's the difference so you don't get stuck. The ones that say alternate are not quad or surround sound. They are just collections of alternate versions of the same songs you've heard. Most are in stereo, maybe all. The ones that say the Beatles in quad or surround sound, that's different. Those are the ones that will give you, 5.1, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be careful going down there. Now, when you're shopping at Jagamart, sometimes what comes up if you hit the jackpot is alternative reality. Alternative reality is a company. I don't know what it is. I just realized I've got the floor here and I don't know what it is, but it is the seller of these discs that come directly to them. I think it's directly, how would I know? But they get it from Bosnia-Herzegovina. So that's near the Ukraine. And they get it from them, and then they were shipping it to us. So they would get it from Bosnia-Herzegovina. They would get a copy of the order from the Jagamart or Alternative Reality, and then they would ship it to you with a reminder, hey, this is going to take 2 or 3 weeks because of COVID and the weather, but I've never had a problem. I have sometimes had to wait, and sometimes I've gone crazy saying, I want this album, I've got to hear it now. But that's where I got it. And to have that album and to tell people I'm going to have it but not let you hear it is cruel, but those are the rules that I have to live by. So I'm not going to be able to play it today, but I am going to play it next time. I'm going to play 3 cuts off of Sgt. Pepper, 1 cut off Revolver, and then to show you how different the albums are, I'm going to play for you 1 cut off of the White Album. And remember, or don't remember, I don't think I've told you yet, the White Album, as put out by Voodoo Records and sold by Alternative Reality, that's 1 word. Well, it's 2 words. 2 words joined together to make one. Alternative Reality's version of the White Album has an extra song at the end of each side. Remember, there's actually two because it's a double album. And so Alternative Reality is a double album, and that's why when the kids come in, they go to I'm not going to follow that up. That's a waste of time. But when you get your copy, is a better way to phrase it. When it comes in the mail and you see that brown mysterious package that almost has no marking as to what it is, that is your plain paper brown bag of goodies from Alternative Reality, which is from Jagamart. And these things cost me only, now there's a trick to this because it looks really cheap. It says $17.50, and you go, well, that's not bad, right? Yeah, $17.50 is a lot because those are pounds. So $17.50 in pounds gets converted to about $24, and then it says, oh, and there's 10 shipping. Well, it's 10 pounds shipping, so now it's going to be another 14. So you're going to actually end up, somehow it gets to almost $38 delivered for each CD. So it's a lot, but if you think about it, that you're going to spread it out and listen to it 3,000 times, it's very, very reasonable. All right, we're done. That's it. Thank you for listening. Please, down there, subscribe. I know everybody tells you that, but I really need it. I've got to get people to hear this because we've got the good news, and nobody knows it. So please subscribe, tell your friends, say, hey, listen to this show, and you'll find out where you can go get the Beatles' unreleased albums in surround sound. And by a month from today, you can have them. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and give us a thumbs up or 5 stars, depending on which system you have that you listen to it. And make sure you have the bell rung so that when I put these songs up so you can hear them, you'll get instant notice, hey, these songs have now been posted, and for the first time you can hear surround sound Revolver. Thanks for listening. Bye.